I swear, I never thought a random Tuesday would change my life forever. But there I was, standing on a crowded street corner, watching Keanu Reeves kneel beside a homeless man like it was the most natural thing in the world. No cameras, no entourage. Just him, dressed in casual clothes, talking softly to someone the rest of us pretended didn't exist. But that's not even the crazy part. The crazy part is what happened after. Let me back up. It started as an ordinary morning. I was late for work, juggling a half-spilled coffee and scrolling through my phone, oblivious to the world around me. The city was its usual chaos, car horns blaring, people shouting into their Bluetooths, bikes weaving through traffic like missiles. And then I saw him, not Keanu. Not yet that I saw him, the homeless guy, slumped against the wall outside a convenience store. His sign was barely legible, just hungry. Anything helps. He had that look people avoid making eye contact with, grime on his face, faded army jacket, hollow eyes that said he'd been invisible for a long time. I did what most people do. I glanced, then looked away, but about 10 steps later, something made me pause. Not guilt exactly, more like curiosity. Because the man was staring at someone approaching from the other side of the street, his face changing from blank exhaustion to disbelief. That's when I saw him, Keanu Reeves. At first, I thought maybe it was a look-alike. No way would the Keanu Reeves just be walking down Main Street like he was out for a casual stroll. But it was him, same relaxed posture, slightly scruffy beard, kindness practically radiating off him like some weird superpower. Now, here's the part that's burned into my brain. Keanu didn't hesitate. Didn't pretend not to see the guy. He walked straight over, crouched down to his level, and said something I couldn't hear over the city noise. I wasn't the only one who noticed. People started slowing down, sneaking glances, pulling out their phones. But Keanu didn't seem to care. It was like the world around him had faded out. I crossed the street, pretending to be casual but totally eavesdropping. You okay, man? Keanu asked softly. The homeless guy blinked like he wasn't sure if he was hallucinating. I'm fine, he stammered, voice raspy. Keanu didn't buy it. You don't look fine. When's the last time you ate? The man didn't answer. Just stared at the ground, ashamed. Without another word, Keanu stood up, walked over to a food truck nearby, and bought 2 sandwiches, a bottle of water, and even a cup of hot coffee. He came back, knelt down again, and handed the food over like it was the most normal thing in the world. Eat, he said simply. No strings attached. Now, most people would have just handed the food and left. But Keanu stayed. He talked to the guy, asked his name, Daniel, it turns out, and how he ended up on the streets. That's when things got weird because Daniel, the homeless man, started crying. Not loud sobs, just silent tears sliding down his dirty face. He whispered something I could barely hear. They only see me when they want to feel good about themselves. But you're just here. Keanu nodded like he understood more than I ever could. They talked for another few minutes, about life, bad luck, and choices. Then Keanu did something that shocked everyone standing there. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a small notebook, and scribbled something on a piece of paper. Folded it. Handed it to Daniel. If you're serious about getting back on your feet, Keanu said quietly, call this number. Tell them Keanu sent you. Daniel's hands shook as he took the paper. His face was a mess of confusion, hope, and disbelief. And just like that, Keanu stood up, gave Daniel a pat on the shoulder, and walked away. No fanfare. No selfie requests. Just, gone. But that wasn't the end, because 3 days later, I saw Daniel again. Only this time, he wasn't sitting on the street. He was walking out of a downtown office building, clean-shaven, wearing donated clothes that actually fit, and holding a small stack of papers. His posture was different, upright, confident, like he'd remembered who he was before the world beat him down. I couldn't help myself. I ran up to him. Hey, weren't you? I mean, are you okay? Daniel grinned. An actual, real smile. I called the number, he said. It was a rehab program. Fully funded. They got me a place to stay, food, even job training. Said Keanu pays for a few spots like that every year. Quietly. No press. I was stunned. All because of one moment. One sandwich. One stranger who didn't just see him but treated him like a human being. But here's the kicker, that wasn't the last time I'd see Keanu Reeves. And the next time, let's just say it was even more unbelievable than the first, that I couldn't stop thinking about that encounter. It haunted me, not in a bad way, but in the kind of way that makes you question everything you thought you knew about people, kindness, and, honestly, yourself. I mean, who just does that? Who takes the time, with zero cameras around, to not just hand over some loose change but to genuinely see someone? Keanu Reeves, apparently, but this story doesn't end with Daniel's smile on that street corner. No, that was just the ripple. What happened next felt more like a tidal wave. About a week later, I was at this coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where the baristas have tattoos of obscure bands, and ordering a regular coffee gets you a side eye. I was sipping my overpriced latte, scrolling through my phone, and there it was, a headline, "Mysterious ACT of Kindness Tied to Keanu Reeves." I nearly spit my coffee. The article had a blurry photo someone snapped of Keanu crouching next to Daniel. No one knew the full story, just a bunch of wild guesses. Some thought it was a publicity stunt. Others claimed it was for a new movie. But I knew better. I kept reading, heart racing, when something caught my eye, a name. Sources say Daniel, the man in the photo, was seen entering a local job assistance program shortly after. Daniel. I hadn't seen him since our brief street corner exchange, and curiosity gnawed at me. I needed to know what happened next. So, impulsively, I tracked down the community center mentioned in the article. It was this nondescript building tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. Faded paint, flickering neon sign. Nothing fancy. I walked in, feeling like an absolute creep. The place smelled like coffee, old books, and faint desperation, the scent of people clinging to hope. A woman at the front desk looked up, her name tag reading Marla. "Hi," I stammered, suddenly realizing how weird this sounded. I'm looking for someone. His name's Daniel. He was, featured in that article about Keanu Reeves?" Marla's eyebrows shot up. Clearly, she'd heard this before. "You another reporter?" she asked, crossing her arms. "No. Just curious," I muttered, realizing how dumb that sounded. But before she could shoo me out, I heard a familiar voice from down the hall. "It's okay, Marla." Daniel. I turned, and there he was, barely recognizable. Gone was the scruffy beard and hollow eyes. He looked healthier, standing straighter, wearing clean jeans and a hoodie that didn't look like it had been salvaged from a donation bin. He had this quiet confidence about him, like someone who'd remembered how to carry their own weight. "Hey," he said with a small smile, walking over. "Didn't expect to see you again." We sat in a cramped corner of the lobby, two plastic chairs between us and a vending machine that buzzed like it was about to explode. "So," I started awkwardly, "you're doing good?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Yeah. Weird, right?" And then he told me everything. After Keanu gave him that piece of paper, Daniel didn't call right away. Too afraid. He'd been let down so many times that the idea of hope felt dangerous. But hunger has a way of stripping away pride, and after 2 more days of cold nights, he made the call. The number led to a nonprofit organization, funded anonymously by donors. But guess who was on that list? Yep. Keanu. They didn't just hand Daniel food and send him on his way. They offered him shelter, therapy sessions, and job training programs. Not the kind of charity that makes you feel like a project, real help. That one moment with Keanu, Daniel paused, his eyes glassy. It wasn't just about the food. It was the first time in years someone looked at me like I was human. I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you even say to that? But here's where things get even crazier. As Daniel was telling me his story, "Marla, who'd been eavesdropping shamelessly, interrupted, "You should tell him about tomorrow." Daniel glanced at her, then back at me, grinning sheepishly. "I'm meeting him." My jaw nearly hit the floor. "Keanu?" "Yeah," Daniel nodded. "Apparently, he checks in on people sometimes. Quietly. No press. Just because." I couldn't believe it. Keanu Reeves was coming here, to this dingy community center wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop that I had to see it for myself. The next day, I showed up early, pretending I was just there to volunteer. Spoiler, I wasn't fooling anyone. The place buzzed with nervous energy. Staff members were trying to act casual, but you could tell everyone was on edge. And then, just like before, he walked in. No entourage. No sunglasses to hide behind. Just Keanu, wearing a simple jacket, jeans, and that same calm energy like the world didn't faze him. He spotted Daniel immediately, breaking into a warm smile. They shook hands, not the awkward kind, but the kind that said, "I remember you. You matter." They sat in the corner, talking quietly, but not before Daniel introduced me. "This is the guy who saw it all," Daniel said with a grin. I stood there like an idiot, trying to play it cool while my brain screamed, "You're talking to an EO." Keanu just nodded, offering a friendly handshake. "Nice to meet you," he said simply, like I wasn't having a minor existential crisis. They talked for a while. About Daniel's progress, his new job prospects, even his plans to help others once he was stable. Keanu listened intently, nodding thoughtfully, no trace of condescension. Just genuine interest. Before he left, he said something that stuck with me ever since: "You don't have to change the whole world. Just one person's world. That's enough." And then he was gone. But that wasn't the last time I'd see him, because somehow, I got pulled deeper into this story than I ever expected. You'd think after meeting Keanu Reeves twice, my life would go back to normal. But nope. That was just the warm-up. Because what happened next turned into something I never could have predicted. It started with a phone call that I was at home, eating cold leftovers and mindlessly scrolling through social media when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I'd let that go straight to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Hey, it's Daniel." I sat up straight. "Daniel? Hey, man. Everything okay?" There was a pause, then his voice dropped to a whisper, "Can you meet me? It's kind of urgent." Now, urgent wasn't exactly the vibe I expected from the guy who'd just turned his life around. But there was something in his voice, nervous, maybe even scared, that had me grabbing my jacket without asking questions. We met at the same coffee shop where I'd first seen that article about him. He was already there when I arrived, hunched over, glancing at the door like he was expecting someone else to walk in. "You good?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. Daniel nodded, but it was the kind of nod that didn't match the look in his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he wrapped them around a lukewarm coffee cup. "Something's off," he muttered. I frowned. "Off how?" Daniel leaned in, lowering his voice. "You remember the nonprofit Keanu connected me with? The one that helped me get back on my feet?" "Yeah, of course." "Well, there's something weird going on. I think Keanu might be in trouble." I blinked. "What?" Daniel explained that after Keanu's visit, he kept in touch with one of the caseworkers from the program, a guy named Leo. Super friendly, always checking in. But Daniel noticed things weren't adding up. Resources were being redirected, some people who'd been promised housing suddenly got turned away, and Leo had started acting different. "Secretive at first, I thought I was just being paranoid," Daniel said, rubbing his temples. "But then I overheard a phone call. Leo was talking to someone about keeping it quiet until the contract's finalized. I didn't know what to think. It sounded like a conspiracy theory, like Daniel was spinning something out of nothing. But the fear in his eyes was real. What does Keanu have to do with it?" I asked. "That's the thing," Daniel whispered. "The funding for the program? It's not just donations. It's his money. Millions. And if someone's skimming off the top, he doesn't know. I sat back, processing. Was Daniel really saying someone was using Keanu Reeves's kindness to pull off some kind of scam? Have you told him? I asked. Daniel shook his head. I don't have his number. Just that contact line. And I doubt they'd let me get through. For a minute, I considered walking away. This wasn't my problem. But then I remembered Keanu's words, you don't have to change the whole world. Just one person's world. That's enough. So I made a decision that would drag me way deeper than I ever wanted to go. We'll figure it out, I said. Together. The next day, we went to the nonprofit's office, pretending Daniel needed help with some paperwork. The receptionist greeted us like normal, but there was an underlying tension in the air, like everyone was walking on eggshells. Leo wasn't there, out for meetings, the receptionist said with a tight smile. Daniel and I exchanged a look. This was our chance. While she was distracted, we slipped down the hall to the back offices. Daniel claimed he knew where they kept the files, paperwork that might show where the money was going. The door to Leo's office was locked. Great, I muttered, but Daniel pulled out a hairpin. Where'd you learn to do that? I whispered, let's just say being homeless teaches you a few things. 2 minutes later, we were inside. Leo's office was unnervingly clean. Just a laptop, some neatly stacked folders, and a framed photo of him shaking hands with donors. But tucked in the bottom drawer, under some generic office supplies, we found a file labeled Discretionary Accounts. The numbers didn't make sense. Money allocated for programs that didn't exist, invoices from companies we'd never heard of. And worst of all, large transfers to an offshore account. This is bad, Daniel whispered. We snapped photos of everything with our phones, then locked the office and slipped out as quietly as we'd come. Later that night, I sent an anonymous email to the contact listed on Keanu's foundation website. I didn't expect a reply, but the next morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, heart racing. Is this the person who sent the email? A calm voice asked. Yes, I croaked, this is Keanu. I nearly dropped the phone. His voice was just like before, calm, measured, but there was a sharp edge to it now. I told him everything, from Daniel's suspicions to what we found in Leo's office. There was a long pause on the other end. Meet me, he said finally. We met in a small, dimly lit cafe outside the city, a place so low-key it didn't even have a sign. Keanu was already there when we arrived, sitting alone in a booth, sipping black coffee. He greeted Daniel with a nod, then turned to me. You did the right thing, he said simply. We showed him the photos. As he scrolled through them, his face remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something. Anger? Disappointment? When he finished, he looked up. This goes deeper than I thought, he murmured. I leaned forward. What do we do? Keanu set down his phone, his jaw tightening slightly. We exposed them. And just like that, we were in it, but we had no idea how dangerous it was about to get. If you'd told me a month ago that I'd be sitting in a shady cafe, plotting to expose a financial scam with Keanu Reeves, I'd have laughed in your face. But there we were, me, Daniel, and freaking Keanu, hunched over a scratched-up table like characters in some low-budget spy thriller. And this wasn't just about stolen money anymore. Keanu's face was calm, but his eyes? Sharp. Focused. The kind of look that says, I've seen worse. I know how this plays out. We need proof, he said quietly, tapping the photos on Daniel's phone. Real proof. Something they can't spin or bury. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. What we found isn't enough. Keanu shook his head. It's a start. But if they've been running this long, they've covered their tracks. We need to catch them in the act. That's when the plan started to form. The nonprofit was hosting a fundraising gala in 3 days. Black tie event, big donors, lots of press. On the surface, it was all about charity. But Keanu suspected it was a front, a way to launder even more money under the guise of philanthropy. We'll go, Keanu said. Daniel's eyes widened. We? As in us? Keanu smiled slightly. Yeah. Us. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried sneaking into a fancy gala when you're basically broke, but it's not exactly easy. Luckily, Keanu had connections. The kind of connections that get you a fake invite with a few phone calls. Gala night that I'd never been to anything like it. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, people dressed like they just stepped out of a fashion magazine. It felt surreal, like I didn't belong, because I definitely didn't. Keanu blended right in, of course. He wore a simple black suit, no tie, just enough to look sharp without drawing too much attention. Daniel and I followed his lead, trying to look like we belonged even though my rented blazer itched like hell. The plan was simple. Keanu would work the room, distracting the big shots, while Daniel and I snuck into the office upstairs. That's where Leo kept the real records, the ones he didn't expect anyone to see, and yeah, it should have been simple, but of course, it wasn't. The first hiccup came when Daniel froze that we were halfway up the grand staircase when he stopped dead in his tracks. I turned, whispering, "What's wrong?" "That's him," Daniel muttered, eyes locked on a man laughing with donors near the bar. Leo, sharp suit, fake smile, the kind of guy who looked like he'd sell you a dream and steal your wallet at the same time. "Keep moving," I hissed, nudging Daniel forward. That we made it to the office, heartbeats pounding louder than our footsteps. The door was locked, of course. But Daniel was faster this time. A quick click of the lockpick, and we were inside. It was exactly what you'd expect: polished wood desk, fancy art on the walls, and a sleek laptop sitting right in the center like a prize. "This is it," Daniel whispered. That he slipped a flash drive from his pocket. Keanu had given it to us, preloaded with software to copy files, and got to work, and that's when it all went to hell. The door burst open. Leo. His smile was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. Well, he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "Didn't expect to see you here, Daniel." I felt my throat tighten. Daniel stood frozen, his hand still on the laptop. Leo glanced at me, his eyes sharp. "You must be the friend." Before I could respond, he stepped closer, voice dropping to a low, threatening whisper, "You have no idea what you're messing with." Daniel found his courage then. "We know what you're doing," he snapped. "You're stealing from people who actually need help." Leo laughed. "You think this is about charity? This is business. And people like you? You're just," he waved his hand dismissively, "collateral." He reached into his jacket. My heart stopped. Gun? No. Just a phone. But the way he smirked as he tapped the screen made my stomach drop. "I just alerted security," he said softly. "You've got about 30 seconds before they drag you out of here. And trust me, they won't be gentle." Panic surged through me. We were screwed. But then, bam, the door slammed open again. Keanu. Security guards. Just him. His calm expression was gone, replaced by pure, controlled fury. Leo's smirk faltered. "What the hell are you doing here?" Keanu didn't answer. He strode forward, grabbed Leo's phone, and tossed it across the room like it was nothing. It shattered against the wall. "You're done," Keanu said, his voice low, dangerous. Leo tried to recover, but he was rattled. "You think your little celebrity act means anything? This isn't Hollywood. You don't scare me." Keanu took a step closer, his face inches from Leo's. "I'm not trying to scare you," he whispered. "I'm here to end this." And just like that, security did show up, two big guys in suits, rushing in with the subtlety of a freight train. For a second, I thought we were about to get tackled, but Keanu just held up his hand. "Stop." And they did. Why? Because they weren't Leo's security, they were with Keanu. Turns out, Keanu had been one step ahead the whole time. While Daniel and I were upstairs, he'd tipped off law enforcement, real investigators who'd been trying to build a case against Leo's organization for months. Within minutes, the place was swarming with officers. Leo was arrested on the spot, and Daniel, he wasn't just some collateral. He became the key witness in one of the biggest charity fraud cases in the city's history. Later that night, after everything settled down, we found ourselves back at that same dingy cafe. No tuxedos. No flashing lights. Just three people who'd somehow stumbled into something bigger than themselves. Keanu sipped his coffee, then looked at us with that same calm smile. "You did good," he said. That I laughed, shaking my head. "We did good." Daniel smiled too, but there was something different about it. "Stronger. Guess you were right," he said softly. "You don't have to change the whole world. Just one person's world." Keanu nodded. "Sometimes, that's how you change the world. You'd think after helping take down a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, life would feel, I don't know, different. Like the world would slow down, or maybe I'd wake up with some kind of superhero glow. But nope. The next morning, I woke up to the same old alarm blaring on my nightstand, the same cracked ceiling above my bed, and the same half-empty carton of milk in my fridge. The only difference? I had Keanu Reeves's number saved in my phone. Yeah, that was new, but this story isn't about me. It's about Daniel. After Leo's arrest, things moved fast. News outlets exploded with headlines like, "Charity Scandal Exposed," with a little help from Keanu Reeves, Hollywood star's secret fight against fraud, former homeless man helps uncover massive nonprofit scheme. Daniel's face was everywhere. Interviews, articles, even a short documentary. For someone who'd spent years feeling invisible, it was overwhelming, but Daniel handled it like a pro. He didn't care about the attention. What mattered was that people were finally listening, not just to his story, but to the stories of the people who'd been ignored, scammed, and left behind by a system that was supposed to help them. With the settlement money from the case, Daniel had a choice: disappear into a new, quiet life, or do something more. Guess which one he picked? 6 months later, Daniel opened his own nonprofit, the Ripple Project. Not some flashy, corporate charity with fancy galas and overpriced hors d'oeuvres. No, this was real. Grassroots. Focused on the people who needed it most: homeless outreach, addiction recovery, job training. All the stuff that had saved him. And Keanu, he wasn't just a silent donor. He showed up. Quietly. No press. No cameras. Just Keanu, rolling up his sleeves, serving food at shelters, sitting down with people who'd been where Daniel once was. I remember one day, watching from the sidelines as Keanu talked to a guy named Eddie, who'd been living on the streets for years. They didn't talk about movies or fame. They talked about life. Struggles. Hope. And when Eddie left that day, he wasn't just carrying a bag of donated clothes. He was carrying something bigger: belief. That was Keanu's real superpower. As for me, I kept in touch with both of them. Every once in a while, I'd get a random text from Keanu: "Saw a cool book you'd like. Sending it your way. Ever tried Ethiopian coffee? Life-changing. Remember, one person's world." Classic Keanu, dropping wisdom bombs like it's casual small talk. But the moment that stuck with me the most came about a year after everything had unfolded. Daniel was hosting a small event for the Ripple Project. Nothing fancy, just a gathering to celebrate how far they'd come. Keanu was there, of course, blending in like he wasn't, At one point, Daniel pulled me aside. He said, "None of this would have happened without you." I laughed. Pretty sure Keanu had something to do with it. Daniel shook his head. "No. You stopped. You noticed. That's where it started." And he was right, because the thing about ripple effects? They don't start with a splash. They start with something small, barely noticeable. A moment. A choice, like stopping on a street corner, like offering a sandwich, like believing someone matters. Before we left that night, Keanu turned to me and said, "Funny how one small act changes everything, huh?" I nodded, and as I walked away, I realized something: the world didn't change overnight, but mine did.